All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Henry Golis. I'm the Director of Technology for all things federal here at Cloudian, and thank you for your attention. I'm basically going to quickly overview and share some insights. As far as AI, what we're seeing as far as AI market trends, AI workflow, as well as provide a little bit tangible on how to leverage PyTorch with our company product, Cloudian Hyperstore. So I like to start all my stories at the beginning, and this really is a data story. And putting up a data point, this is a 2024 McKinsey survey talking to about 1,300 individuals in enterprise organizations. And the net here is that about 70% of them have one form of AI in a business function. Now, this can be anything from like, hey, we have an AI service chatbot to, we got Copilot and we're rolling, you know what I mean? So with all new technologies, there's obviously some kind of adoption and ramp up. If you're familiar with who Michael Faraday is, he's basically the father of the modern electric motor. Electrical adoption took about 30 years in the manufacturing workspace to actually become relevant. Now, we're not anticipating this in the Gen AI space, but where we're seeing the tip of the spear for adoption is customer service. So as I mentioned, the customer service AI chatbot, and where we're seeing the next kind of frontier is for IT operations. And what this is basically known colloquially as IT ops or AI ops. So using, let's say, natural language processing to streamline and basically increase efficiency and output for automated IT operations. So when we talk about this story, again, it's all data-driven. It's talking about data growth. So if you look at the size of data and basically the complexity and the amount that we're talking about between different iterations of ChatGPT 3 and ChatGPT 4, we're talking about like an order of magnitude more data. And what really comes down to is that when we're talking about LLMs, those are large language models, they're good at text. But when we start talking to enterprise AI and what's coming next from a Gen AI perspective, we're talking about capacities that's going to be growing. Now, why is this going to happen? Well, very bluntly, we're moving from text data, which is really, really small, and we're going to rich data, which means this can be anything from pictures to videos to, let's say, IoT telemetry data, et cetera, et cetera. So when we start conceptualizing and thinking of a problem, we think of it in the size of data. Like, let's say, self-driving or autonomous vehicles, that's an exabyte worth of data kind of problem. So with all new technologies, anytime they come around, there's obviously going to be concerns. One of the things that I wanted to point out, the top things that I wanted to actually talk about, I thought were very interesting. So first one, data privacy and security. Let's be honest, that's a no-brainer. Not really surprised here. The second one I thought was very interesting, and that actually talks about the organization's ability for their employees, so like you and your coworkers, et cetera, to actually use the tools at hand effectively. And the third point I thought was most interesting because it talks about data infrastructure, like good old school data centers and the space and the storage and the compute infrastructure to actually do all this AI tooling. So when we're talking about where this AI tooling actually happens, I was surprised to know, and again, more data points, that about a third of this is happening in public cloud space, so hyperscalers. The other 2/3, give or take, are happening in private cloud, so inside your organization's data center, and or a hybrid functionality where you have your main corpus of data or your main data set sitting on-prem in your private cloud, and you're pushing data up to public cloud as you need it because they have wonderful and basically limitless compute resources. All right, so the key takeaway here is that every organization is prepping and getting ready for their AI strategy. And if your organization doesn't have one, that's okay too. So what can you do? Well, because again, I love data and this is a data story, let's ask Gartner. And now I got to read this verbatim because they got some really cool wording here. So basically, Gartner's recommendation, and this is from February, is that you're going to want to deploy a single storage platform, which means consolidate your data, and you're going to build an end-to-end storage infrastructure. Well, that just means building a data lake. So basically, Gartner's recommendation for preparation is build a single giant data lake where all your data resides. So from a company pitch perspective, this is how Cloudian helps. Cloudian is a software-defined, on-premise S3-compatible object store, which in English means we can be used as as a data lake because it is very scalable, it is very secure, and ultimately has some of the highest S3 compatibility in the marketplace, meaning all your AI tooling is going to work with it seamlessly. So quickly moving through the AI workloads and kind of AI ecosystem. Basically, from an AI ecosystem perspective, it's multifaceted. You're going to have different types of layers providing data storage, infrastructure, visualization, and ultimately model generation. And the key point that I want to take from this slide is that ultimately there is a relationship and a synergy between where your data sits, how it's accessed, and all the available tooling that basically enables generative AI or AI in general. If I double click and look at a specific workflow or a general workflow, they all kind of look the same, but you're going to have different actors coming in. So you read this chart from left to right. Ultimately, starting at data ingestion, you're going to have different tools that are basically providing data for these workloads. So they're going to be like Kafka, they're going to be talking about Splunk, maybe Cribble is going to be there as well, and they're going to bring all the data in and they're going to clean it up just a little bit so you basically have no garbage in, garbage out type of stuff. From a data cleansing and a data preparation perspective, you're going to have something like Spark that's basically going to go prepare the data for the models that are actually going to be doing the AI work to actually operate. So these are going to be tools such as PyTorch or TensorFlow, those type of things. From an analytics and an insights layer, you're going to have Hadoop and Spark providing those type of insights, and ultimately there will be some kind of visualization or perhaps visualization leveraging Tableau and or Elasticsearch. So the whole thing is that once this model has been generated, it's going to be moved into production where it's going to provide some business value. So an actual tangible real-world result. And so again, the main theme here is that you have data storage relates to how your tools access it, and it's an ecosystem because, again, this is a data story. All right. So moving on to kind of rubber hits the road type of thing. So from an actual tooling perspective, I'm going to go through a quick overview of how PyTorch connects to Cloudian and basically throw up a quick demo because, 1,000 words or you can show a video type of thing. So basically, at the beginning, what is PyTorch? PyTorch is an open source machine learning framework. And what PyTorch does is it leverages Cloudian Hyperstore and leverages the S3 buckets for all of its AI ML workflow. Now, it does this by leveraging something called S3 Torch connector. So S3 Torch connector is simply a S3 connector that allows you to connect to Hyperstore. And personally, I love it when the name of the tool actually describes its function like Big Hammer. So anyway, S3 Torch connector allows data to be loaded very efficiently and parallelized into PyTorch. And that's mainly because, well, two things. PyTorch, the connector, is highly parallelized, and Hyperstore's architecture is distributed and relatively flat, allowing for highly efficient, basically fast and efficient data transfer. So once the data set is loaded, PyTorch is going to do its magic as far as computational generation and basically model development. And it's going, once it goes through an entire epoch, which simply means an entire set of the data, it's going to create a checkpoint. Now, checkpoints are important because sometimes you have models will hallucinate or you have data interruptions, et cetera, et cetera. So for all of you that are old enough to remember to save your Word document, it's literally that type of thing. So the next step here after the model is being trained is either it's going to iterate more for more tuning or development, or it's actually going to be pushed into that production system generating that real-world business outcome. So the net is that the synergy between PyTorch and Hyperstore effectively allows you to generate and train your models quickly and efficiently. So without further ado, I'm going to let my colleague introduce PyTorch and how it actually works in the real world. Okay, so in order for it to get the audio, I'm just going to dub over it. Ultimately, what we're looking at here is the Python script that is basically being used by PyTorch. And what Sasha's doing here is he's defining the connector, so the connection points for where it's supposed to connect to from a Hyperstore perspective. And at the end, being object storage, it's just an S3 endpoint. So he's basically filling all this stuff out, and it's basically based on AWS CLI, and you can see that it's pretty straightforward. If anyone has used AWS CLI before, you'll know exactly what this basically does. kind of moving further down the line, he's basically asking or basically dictating that he wants a checkpoint written after every epoch, and it's to leverage Hyperstore as that point for data storage. So if we take a look at the Cloudian interface through the Cloudian management console, you can see that a bucket called training has been pre-created, and these checkpoints are basically being generated there. So as he starts going through the epochs, or as PyTorch starts moving through those epochs, so again, iterating through the data, we'll be able to see that the buckets and the information is being populated on the Hyperstore side. Usually I'll do some stand-up comedy while we wait, but today's not the day for that. Wonderful, here we go. So you can see under the checkpoints folder that a checkpoint has been basically written out. So again, because AI and ML is an iterative model, we're going to be going through these systems and these processes multiple times, and after each multiple time, it's basically going to go ahead and create that checkpoint. So it's basically it's almost an infinite process until you actually generate and get that final model, and then that's moved off to production. So with that, just to kind of Cole's notes and wrap it up, ultimately, what's the value proposition and why am I speaking here today? Well, it's on behalf of Cloudian. And one of the reasons why Cloudian is such an effective data lake is, again, from the ability to connect to multiple various tools to provide that scalability and security that's needed for a lot of the government use cases that we're talking about. And ultimately, from a customer perspective, our customer base likes us and tells us this feedback through Gartner peer review. So if you've ever seen any of the peer insights, we basically won that 4 years in a row, which is pretty cool. So if you have any questions, I'll be just down the aisle. And thank you very much for your time, and hope you have a great day.